Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Zoom today. My name is Shang Saavedra. I also have Marlena Holden, as you can see. Today's Zoom is going to be about cover letter and resume writing. All of you guys who are currently in the Zoom, your videos and your audios are being muted at this time so that Marlena can be the focus of the meeting. I also want to say that this is part of an ongoing career series from Save My Sense that is being held during the COVID-19 crisis, being provided for free. Look out for announcements on my Instagram and also on my webpage for how to access more. As way of introduction, in case you guys don't know who I am, my name is Shang Saavedra. I'm a blogger at Save My Sense on Instagram. I have degrees from Harvard and University of Chicago. I am work optional today, and I've navigated many career changes in my short career, and I've also been a small business owner. And this is a passion project of mine to help as many of you guys as possible. Also remember, this video is being recorded and will be released on my webpage by April 9th. There will be a Q&A session at the end. You can write your chats at the end of you can write your chats in the side of this app, and what we'll do is I will be able to see all your questions, then be able to then have Marlena take over the Q&A portion. So by way of introduction, Marlena. Hi. Marlena is amazing. She's worked in marketing and communications. She's been here for 18 years in a variety of industries, higher education, healthcare, advertising, name it. She's been a manager for 8 years, so Marlena really knows her stuff. And she's worked a lot longer than I have. So it's always important to learn from people who have more experience than I do. And Marlena also recently became debt-free as of February 2020 as a result of using Dave Ramsey's plan, along with what she says, lots of guidance and truth bombs from yours truly, Paula Pant, the You Need a Budget app, and the hashtag debt-free community tag on Instagram, the wonderful community that I think a lot of us here are a part of. So I'm going to turn over to Marlena, and I'm going to mute my video and have her get started.
Thank you so much, Shang, and welcome everybody. I am thrilled to do this. My name is Marlena Holden, and Shang provided a fantastic introduction to me. For me, I'm joining you from the Midwest, where we're finally getting some sun and warmer weather, so great to see all of you. I also want to start with saying that I am scared to be doing this live with Shang, but in her wise words, I'm doing it scared. So I listened to her along my debt-free journey, glad to be there, and really happy to share some ideas with you. So as Shang mentioned, I've been a manager for 8 years. I've been working in marketing and communications for 18 years, and I've been on many hiring committees. And what I'm going to be talking to you about are things that I've learned along the way, things I learned even 18 years ago when I was preparing to go into the work world. And I hope I can provide a little comfort in letting you know that what I'm sharing with you, and will be later shared on a blog post, is a formula. It's a formula that I learned and I continue to use and refine, and hopefully you can take away some skills along the way. So let's start a little bit with cover letters. Again, writing a cover letter is a formula. Once you have the essential elements, you can customize it to meet the needs of the job you're applying for. I want to emphasize that you really want to spend a lot of time on your cover letter, making sure it's tailored to just what's right in the job description. The reason is HR professionals and hiring managers like myself spend a lot of time crafting what we think is an ideal position. In some cases, some people have waited 18 months to hire this position, so they're really looking for the right person. And the cover letter is your opportunity to show that you have done the research into the company and organization, that you're passionate about it, that you really understand the needs of the organization. I am still using the template that was shared with me 18 years ago when I was in my final semester of graduate school and knew that the life of academe wasn't for me. I went into the job center, I met with a career coach, she gave me a template, and again, it's the same one that I still use today and will be shared in the blog post later on. So let's get started. It sounds very cheesy, but I start every cover letter, and I recommend you start every cover letter with a very simple statement. It is with great enthusiasm that I'm applying for job ABC at XYZ company. Something as simple as that. Sometimes people feel, I've seen some sample cover letters where people will say things like, stop your job search now, you found the right person. That talks to me more about you than what the position is itself. So again, it is with great enthusiasm that I'm applying for this job. If you know someone within the company and they're an acquaintance, I do recommend that you mention them. So for example, the next sentence could be, Global Marketing Director Sam Smith told me about this opportunity and encouraged me to apply. If you have the name of someone within the company to vouch for you, I really highly recommend that you use it. So then after that, as you go into your first paragraph, really state the why about why you think you'll be a good fit. This is where you can start sharing how you're an ideal candidate. And this is the spot to do some creative bragging. You know, I live in the Midwest. I've mostly lived in the Midwest my life, and we're not very good about bragging, but this is the opportunity to talk about your strengths. So for example, I might say in the first paragraph, after the introduction, I believe that the depth and breadth of my marketing experience, combined with my ability to acutely understand Fortune 500 business needs, make me an ideal candidate for this position. So I've shown that, you know, I'm interested in the job, I have a little bit of experience, and I can go from there. The next few paragraphs, and it depends on how long you've been working. Chung really pointed out to me earlier that, you know, we want to make sure that things are as brief as possible with giving the meat of the content. So if you're earlier in your career, this next portion might just be 2 paragraphs. If you worked a little bit longer, it could be three to 4 paragraphs, depending upon what you want to explain. So these next paragraphs talk about your experience directly linked to the role. So for example, you might say, I've worked in public relations, an asset that would benefit your relationships with an XYZ company. So you're linking what you've done in the past to how it's going to benefit that company. Then in your second to last paragraph or around there, you want to outline how you can help the company. For example, you could use things like, I've proven at previous positions that I'm able to save companies X% of dollars on spending, an asset I look forward to bringing your company. This is really showing people how you're able to do something, and this is where I really recommend that you use numbers. So numbers, for example, could be how you've increased revenue, how you've decreased cost of spending, how you were able to build up a portfolio of work for your company, how you were really able to help. So then again, you're linking those numbers of what you've done and tying them to the direct work as well. So then in your final sentences and paragraph, don't forget to ask for the job. That's one thing I remain amazed in my years of hiring, is that not only are people not asking for the job, sometimes they seem even disinterested in the cover letter or in the interview process. So it's really important to end with a simple close such as, I look forward to hearing from you and sharing more about my excitement to work at your organization, and then provide your contact information and say at your earliest convenience. For some people who work in the creative fields, maybe you're in marketing, communications, graphic design, this could be an opportunity to include another link to your portfolio. So you could also say, for more information about my sample media kits or what I've done for press kits, please look at this link. So then after you send your materials to the central point, so whether it's the hiring manager or the other way that you're able to submit the information, I would send the email to the person, the contact that you have at the organization. So if you remember, we had that internal recommendation before from Global Marketing Manager Sam Smith. That's when you'd say, you know, Dear Sam, thank you for lending me use of your name in the cover letter. Attached are the materials I submitted. I found that in the past, sometimes an internal candidate will advance your materials. There are some industries where if you have an internal connection, your application might get bumped up a level or two. And in some organizations, that internal candidate might also be eligible for a bonus if you're a successful hire and stay within the company for a little while. So it's a win-win for both places. So I'm going to shift a little bit to resumes right now. But again, I want to really emphasize that your cover letter is your time to shine. It's your time to show that you have paid attention, you've honed into the words that need to be focused on within the job description, and it's tailored to meet those people's needs that the hiring manager needs. Resumes. So a resume is something that really also highlights how you've been successful. And I really want to emphasize, very rarely does your resume need to be more than 1 page. If you're in the academic field and you're working on something called a CV, sometimes it's the bigger the better. I've seen ones that are 30 pages long. That's more built for that industry. But in the main private sector, or many parts of the public sector as well, you do not need an extensive resume. And you want to think about it as your highlight reel. So your resume is the point where you're looking at, you know, previous and past positions and saying these are the best parts of the position of how I was able to succeed. It is not a list of tasks, it's a list of the accomplishments that you've had within that area. So one thing I hear a lot about from recent grads is if you need to list your GPA or grade point average. I personally, working in the marketing communications field, has never needed to know someone's GPA. It is something depending upon the job that you might be looking for, the recruiter might ask. So in some fields, those are required. But if you do need to post it, I do not believe you need to put it on the top. That's just in my world. Again, there was a couple of questions that came in before about listing your education. I recommend putting your education on the bottom. It then actually levels the playing field for both new grads and more seasoned veterans within the workforce, and that you don't actually have to put the year on it. I don't think any more or less for anybody if I look at a resume where somebody says, you know, graduated college in 1980 versus expected graduate in 2020. As long as you list the school that you went to, I think that's perfectly fine. You want to remember in each of your points to use active verbs. If you're in the current position, you use current verbs, and if it's a past position, you use past tense. Active verbs meaning things such as manage, direct, supervise, allocate, create. And sometimes I hear from people who might be starting out maybe 6 months into their career, they might say, well, I was never a manager, I've never been a director, I've never supervised. But you have. There are parts of your job where you might have been the leader, the point person for helping people understand why you needed to do the projects that you did. So think about those bullet points, those top things that made something happen in that role, and those are the words that you pull forward. There are wonderful guides online everywhere that talk about key active verbs where you can then link what you did to more of an active verb. Again, this is where you want to really show your numbers. So again, every single bullet point is that highlight reel. And this is where you need to include some type of data point in almost all of your bullet points. So for example, you might say, I managed 8 to 12 annual shareholder events ranging in size of 50 to 1,000 attendees. Or another bullet point could be, I decreased spending by 10% in 3 consecutive quarters. Or I increased revenue by 5% for 3 consecutive years. This gets the attention of the hiring manager and shows that you've thought through your work as a doer rather than someone who just does because it's in their job description. Shung pointed out that another format she likes is I accomplished X by doing Y, which resulted in Z. The Z is very important, and your impact ideally should have numbers behind it. Even in the creative field, there are ways for you to find data points and numbers. So for example, my example of using 8 to 12 annual events was something that I did early on in my career. So somebody might not think that event management is something that could have numbers, but it has tons of numbers. It shows that I was able to manage large scale events. It shows that I was able to stay within budget. It shows the impact, which drives revenue, etc. And that was all done at a nonprofit. So again, remember to really emphasize your highlight reel. The further down on your resume, so the job that you haven't had not most recently, those can have fewer bullet points. So if you've had a job 10 years ago and it's still on your resume, feel free to only have that be 2 or 3 bullet points, but your most recent job can have up to 5 bullet points, unless it's an industry standard or industry recommendation where they really want to see a lot of what you've done. Again, this is the important part to make sure that you're looking at the job description to key in some of those keywords. So your resume is that foundation that ideally you've had set, and you want to make sure you tweak it every now and then. And then when you look at that job description, maybe you'll change a few words, but you're not going to tinker with it as much as you would the cover letter in most cases. When it comes to the skills, pay very close attention to what the job description actually has, and list those skills verbatim. So if they're looking for SQL+, if they're looking for Tableau, having a generic statement by saying, I know all of this operating system, pull out the specific things from the job description. That's how a lot of times things also get through the screening process. And there were a lot of questions that came in before that asked about getting through the screening process. And that's why it's so important to look at what the job description is, because the first line of defense most often is most often someone in HR and somebody who actually doesn't know the work. So I've had many instances where we received candidates who came through and maybe they only met qualifications based upon their education level, but when you looked at them, you felt like something was a little off, and then maybe you looked into the pool in the back and said, oh, why did this person meet the qualifications? And the HR rep might say, well, they didn't use these exact words. They didn't reference this that was in the job description. So that's when you say, I have 5 years experience, I have 10 years experience, I have a master's degree, I have these certifications. Those are the tools that are going to help get your resume and cover letter screened through. So I want to talk about some other general tips. Make sure your LinkedIn is up to date. It does not have to look flashy and fancy by any means, but it's very helpful for you to have an up-to-date photo. It doesn't have to be a glamour shot, but something that looks reasonably recent. Again, you don't have to have any fancy banners, but I will guarantee you that someone on the hiring committee will Google your name and look for you. I know sometimes in my line of work, HR says, don't Google people because you never know what you're going to find out online. But you should safely assume that someone will look at you, and having your LinkedIn up to date is just a point for them to say, okay, this person has worked in this industry or does have some type of experience. Again, I want to emphasize to assume that an HR rep is screening your materials. That's why the keywords are essential in the cover letter and resume. Really scour the job posting to make sure you're using words used in the posting. The HR rep often writes a bulk of the posting, so they'll want to see that you paid attention to what's posted. I want to talk about references a little bit. Have your references prepped in advance so you don't need to wait on them if your references are asked for. Sometimes when you submit a job, they might ask for things like a example of your work and 3 references, or sometimes people don't need to do references until the end. Either way, once you're on the job market, it's time to dust off your reference list. It's good to have about 5 people in mind so you can think about who might be the best fit. A good idea for references would be someone that you have worked with, a colleague, somebody you reported to. If you've been a supervisor before, it could be somebody that you manage. And it's also good sometimes to have somebody in the community. Maybe you volunteered somewhere and they can speak to some of the character aspects of it. And on your resume, then you can list how you know them on your reference sheet. So you could say, you know, Sam Smith was my manager at ABC Global, or you can say, you know, Andrea Jones was the person that I supervised. List all of their contact information, not only their email, but also their phone number. But it's really important to prep your references because there have been times where references are called even before you get to the final job areas and you want them to be prepped. So letting them know ahead of time, sending them all of your hiring materials, sending them a link to the job description is also essential so they can see what type of job you're applying for, and also detailing out to them what you want them to emphasize. So if this job at ABC Global really needs you to know how to examine ROI, you want your references to talk about what a data person you are. If this person is really about relationship management, you want them to talk about how you've been able to establish large networks and connections. So make sure that they understand that this might be different based upon each job, and then they'll feel well equipped to help you along the way. So when you are alerted that your references will be contact, let them know that they'll be in contact. And then, you know, a note that Shang had made is if you haven't talked to the reference in a while, it's a good time to get on the phone with them before you start your job search so they know what's going on. And don't forget to send thank you gifts to your references once the job search is done. Really, a simple thank you note. I've done coffee in the past to thank people along the way, because a lot of times these are your mentors and they want to see you doing really well. It's very, sometimes people ask me what you should do after the job interview if you need to send an email or a card. I find that mail tends to be a little slow and sometimes people are making up decisions that day. It's not uncommon to have 8 phone interviews right in a row, and then maybe the next day you need to give to a hiring manager a decision, or you're the hiring manager and you're on a tight timeline. I think an email is always great. If you have time or there's more of a personal connection, I think a card would be fine. But I would prepare that email almost in advance so that when you're done with the interview, you can get off the interview, thank the person for the time, and again, reinforce your excitement for working for a job. Employers really want to know that you want to work there, that you're not just going through the motions, that this is something you're passionate about, you're worth the time and energy that they put in there, and after screening 100 resumes, it got down to a certain number, and to go on from there, you want to stay top of mind for folks as well. So those are just a few points, tips that I have. Please look for the blog post later where I share one of my actual cover letters, tweaked a little bit so you can see what that looks like. But Shang, I'm going to give it back over to you.
Awesome. Well, Marlena, stay on because we got a ton of questions ready for you. So a note to everyone who's on the Zoom, please use the chat to send questions. I am going to be seeing them, so I'll field them to Marlena as we go. We have about 10 minutes for a Q&A, then we're going to announce the giveaway winner at the end and then wrap all of this up. For those of you who may have joined late, don't fear, this video will be made available for everyone on savemysense.com by April 9. And Marlena has been so generous to write 2 really amazing blog posts that summarize what she just shared with us today. So don't worry if you missed it, it will be replayed. So Marlena, one question that I've gotten and seen a lot, and I have thoughts on this too, is should you have a summary or objective on your resume?
Do you want me to go first?
Yes.
Okay. It depends. It depends on your industry, and it depends that it's not a very generic statement. So I have seen statements where people say, my goal is to get a manager job in quality data assessment. That doesn't tell me anything about your interest in the position. Again, it tells me more that you haven't taken a look at the job description. I think if you, I've seen it work really well with seasoned veterans who can say at the top, I have 30 years of experience with these types of things, and then it leads well into the cover letter. So it's industry dependent. I want you to really tailor to the job and who you are and your industry at hand. But I think you could go with a resume that speaks to your strengths and what you've done, because people have very limited time in reviewing materials.
Okay, Marlena, I think your audio broke up just a little bit. I would mute and unmute. I would, just to summarize, Marlena said it really depends on the industry that you're applying. And I think a good way to test that is to network with people in that industry to see what is the norm. There's never really a clear answer. In my industry, for example, I would say the answer is no, you don't need a summary objective, because in my industry, we basically ignore it. My industry being management consulting. Thank you so much. Next question, and this has been asked to me in a couple of different ways, is how should one discuss gaps in the resume? Gaps either due to layoffs, due to taking time off to care for family, for children, things of that sort.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. Yep.
So that is a very reasonable question. I think that's something that you address in your cover letter. So your resume can detail what you've done, but in your cover letter, it's okay to say, between these past 3 years, I managed, personal concerns or familial concerns. As long as it's addressed in the cover letter, it's fine. This happens. Most people have, within their career, stepped aside for some point. I myself I was once laid off, and I know what that's like, and I just addressed it in the cover letter.
Same here. I think people are understanding when it's a layoff. I mean, right now there's a lot of layoffs going on. It would not be surprising for me to see a lot of layoffs coming up on people's resumes, and no one's going to hold it against you. It's better that you be honest and try to paper over it. Because if it's a company that no longer exists, if an HR has to do a background check, they're gonna be like, where did this company go, right? Like you have to be pretty clear about those things. But it's also helpful to say, during this time, I still continue to work on my skills by, taking a night class or going to workshops like these and working on practicing coding, for example. So that's a great way to kind of soften the blow a little bit on taking a longer break. All right, next question. I've heard it said that you should stay for at least 2 years before changing a job because it looks better on a resume. What if you have not been able to demonstrate long-term results in your current job because you have not been there long enough? I guess it's a 2-part question.
Yeah. I've heard that said throughout my time. I really don't feel that you need that 2 years anymore. I think as long as you stay someplace 6 months, I think that's sufficient. If it was fewer than 6 months, that might make me wonder, but there could be a whole host of reasons why you didn't stay at a job for 6 months. The company could not exist anymore. You could have been defunded. Your department could have been let go. So there's a number of ways to talk about that. And then again, talk about that in your cover letter. Your cover letter is your way to really talk through some of the challenges that you faced, and then I'd pose it as a solution. So you can say at ABC Global, I was faced with many challenges and I was able to meet that solution by doing X, Y, Z.
Absolutely. Same thing. I would give that same advice as well, in that in some industries, for example, I've seen this a lot in entry-level retail, and I've also seen this especially in entry-level technology. jumping jobs is very common for the first 3 to 5 years of a person's career, and the average tech job tenure these days is quite low. And there shouldn't, you can always spin it in a positive way. You can show, for example, oh, maybe your responsibilities peaked at one job and you wanted something more challenging. Or, for example, you had to move, in which case a lot of people have to change jobs when they move. So it's a perfectly legitimate reason. What does raise a bit of a suspicion is if the rate at which you're changing jobs is much more frequent than what the industry might be used to. So like I said, in retail, it's very, very common for people to change jobs every year. In academia, not so much. So again, it's important for you to network and figure out what might be more of the norm for your industry. Great. Okay, this is a bit more of a specific question, but I think it's important because Marlena, you mentioned that we need about 5 references. And this person said, I have difficulty having a number of references that an open position might require. What can they do to overcome that?
So again, think too how you might have participated in the community. Did you ever volunteer before? I think that's an opportunity to go to previous colleagues as well. So it can be challenging when you're new in your career as well to find the depth of those references, but you can go to other colleagues and say, would you vouch for me? And then it's perfectly acceptable to say on your resume, here are references of 3 colleagues who can speak to the work that I've done.
Absolutely. When I was much younger in my career too, I was struggling to get references both for new job searches because a lot of them were my existing bosses and it's really awkward to approach an existing boss when you're trying to get a new job. But also for business school, I needed a number of references. I was really scratching my head to get one. I actually went to a couple of the clubs that I volunteered for, both in college and also post-college, and looked up other people that I worked with, friends, peers, and I said, I primed them a little bit. I got on a phone call with them. I asked them and I said, would you be my reference? Here's what I'm applying for. Here are qualities I would love for you to highlight if you feel so, right? It's always up to the reference to say what they want to say about you, but giving them a little bit of support and tips in advance and just going deeper into your network can really make a difference. Another great question is, when applying to jobs via USA Jobs, I don't know if that's specific to a system or not, do I need to tailor my resume to each job?
So if you are applying to, let's say, 3 jobs within an organization, yes, you should tailor it to the position you're applying for, because it shows, again, that you put that effort into it. So again, it's really that cover letter is the time to do that. I have seen some large companies where you don't need a cover letter and you can just click all the jobs you're interested in. So that's a different perspective. Then again, make sure your resume is tightened up to speak to those industry requests.
Great. All right, so this question is specific to religion. I went to a very religious school coming right out of high school. How do I go about addressing this on my resume? The religious school is no longer important to me. It was a phase of my life, but the name of the school, I guess it must be a school that's notorious for something. I'm not going to name the name. Sounds crazy on a resume.
So again, this would be another reason for why listing your education at the bottom could be beneficial for you. And if the job you are applying to is so the opposite potentially of what the school was, speak to that in the cover letter. So speak to that as, I've gone through XYZ changes. I've come to these types of values in my life that speak to the company. So then you're addressing the company and saying, I mirror and match the values of this organization.
So many of you might know that I am religious myself. And one of the biggest involvements that I had in college was a religious group that was not affiliated with my college. It had my college name in it, but it was managed by a national organization. I left it on there because that experience actually was where I developed a lot of my leadership skills, such as influencing people, doing the grind, doing the hard work to prep for, weekly meetings and things like that. I didn't address it directly on my cover letter because I thought it wasn't relevant unless someone really brought it up, but I wanted to highlight why it was important to me. And some people asked about it, some people didn't. The job search becomes, you gain much more advantage in a job search when you can connect with someone personally at the company and you can get through the whole HR keyword search nightmare. You get to somebody who's on, the hiring manager, who knows the hiring manager directly, then a lot of these questions that might sound like red flags on your resume can be glossed over because someone on the inside is vouching for you. And I'll have more content around how to network your way into a job rather than applying online to a job that can make or break difference. All right, Marley, I'm watching the time, so there have been a lot of really great questions, but unfortunately, we're gonna have to wrap this up. Would you do the honor of announcing who won the giveaway?
Yes, so I used random.org, and I'm very excited to say that Danielle Coates is the winner of the personal review by me. Yay! Thanks, Danielle. So I will be contacting you via email, and you and I can talk about how we can help you with a custom resume and cover letter review.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. This is great. Take a picture of us, share about us on Instagram. We will be releasing this video on savemysense.com by April 9th. Notes and wonderful blog posts written by Marlena will be accompanying this, all free to you guys. And so feel free to, reach out to us if you have any questions from this. But we're so excited to have had you on board and for this very first Zoom call that I personally hosted, because I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I have technical issues? But it looks like it went well. So awesome. Well, I'm going to end the meeting. I'm wishing you all health, happiness, luck, and all of that. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.